Give it a few minutes and the screen will catch up. There we are. So we want to improve your skills to improve your grade, and that is the theme we are going for today. So just for those of you who are brand new to OET, a little introduction of what the listening subtest is like. It is, of course, in 3 parts, A, B, and C. In part A, you're listening to 2 5-minute patient healthcare provider audio interviews. And notice I don't say patient doctor or patient nurse. It could be, quite frankly, any healthcare professional, but of course there are some that are more common. Each audio is about 5 minutes. And in each case, the questions are 12 blank space completion that you have to do. In part B, you have 6 shorter audios. They may be clinical setting, that is, talking to patients, or non-clinical, so things like admin and people talking about procedure. And the situations change, and each one has a 3-option MCQ that you have to answer. And then, of course, part C, you have 2, again, longer audios, 6 minutes, approximately, these are all approximate, with a healthcare professional. It's either a lecture or an interview, but in the interview setting, the interviewer says very short bits, and the healthcare professional is the one who does far more speaking. And for each of those 2 longer audios, you have 6 questions each one 3 options. Okay, so let's look at the specific skills needed in each part of the subtest. In the part A, the essential skill is the ability to elicit exact detail from the audio. Here, you're not being asked to interpret, you're being asked to listen for exact information. And in writing, you should write, filling in the space with as exact an answer as you hear. Yes, sometimes I know people will ask, can you put an abbreviation if it is like a longer answer? What happens with poor spelling, or if you make a spelling mistake, or if you put a singular as opposed to a plural? Those are questions we will come to afterwards. Please remind me by typing in the question once the presentation is finished, and I'll come back to those. But right now we're focusing on the skill. Okay, so helpful skills in doing this start even before you start doing a part A, and you can see here what the part A looks like. Okay, so you get the introduction, and the narrator reads out this introduction, and then you have 30 seconds to look at the notes, and that is 30 seconds for each audio. So in this 30 seconds, you just look at this one here. Okay, so you've got 30 seconds. So you've got to be really able to skim very, very quickly. So the ability to read quickly is very helpful. And of course, that comes from practicing reading. And once you have done that, another skill is called preempting. What this is looking at what is on the page. What kinds of scenario is it? And knowing what kind of scenario is it, what kind of information, what kind of vocabulary, what kind of verbs, what kind of grammar is likely to come up. Why is this helpful? This is helpful because you can say it takes the language from back here where it's resting to working memory so that it is immediately on the tip of your fingers. So for example, an example I like to give my students is, if I say, oh, breakfast, my breakfast, the minute I say my breakfast, you start thinking about things, egg, coffee, tea, cereal. okay? So that when I start talking now, you're listening out for breakfast foods. You're listening out for a breakfast time of day. Okay, you're listening out for behavior around breakfast. You're not, for example, expecting me to talk about shopping or going hiking or something like that. So once the front of your brain is primed to hear this information, you engage with it that much more quickly, which helps you keep up with the audio. Okay, so the next skill is noting signpost words. So here is 2 questions, just a tiny little quiz, and you can type it into the box. I see more people coming in from Sri Lanka, Saudi Arabia again from Sudan. Great. So here is this question. What does anyone know? And you can type it into the box. Does anyone know what we mean by signposts in a conversation? What do we mean when we say signposts in a conversation? Or in an audio, or in anything you're listening to? Does anyone know? I'll give you a few seconds to type in to the answer box. Now there's a delay as always, sometimes it's longer. So if I'm sitting here, it's not because anything has broken down. I'm just waiting for you guys to answer. And having said that, which are the signposts on this page? Okay, yeah. So I see people have started writing in medical history, current symptoms, action required. Yes, Rizwana, you are generally in the right direction. Anyone else has an idea about what we mean by signposts? Conclusion, not really. Direction, Shazia, yes, that is closer. That actually is in the direction. By signposts, we mean like words or cue words that kind of tell the listener which direction the conversation is going to go in. Exactly. Yes, Sharma, to show which direction. Okay. So, for example, if I were to say, with respect to grocery shopping, and I start talking, grocery shopping is the signpost. It's like telling you, I'm about to start talking about groceries or the cost of groceries or types of things I like to buy. And the same thing applies in an audio, okay? So signposts in an audio will be words that the speakers say, indications, correct, Suping, and keywords. Yes, Jean-Camille, yeah. They're words that the speaker is going to say that will tell you, oh, they're about to start talking about X, Y, Z. Right? And someone earlier up mentioned medical history, current symptoms, and so on. And yes, exactly. Those are the signposts. And signposts are also within here, things like failure to. Okay, eyes appear. So that when you hear these words or things that are similar to these words, you perk up. So understanding how signposts work and how they are positioned in the listening paper A is a useful skill to have and a useful skill to practice, to focus on developing when you do your practice papers. But another skill then is also rephrasing, because while they are looking for the exact words or as close as possible in here, what is said around those words might be slightly different from what you see here. So for example, instead of failure to, The speaker may say, I couldn't, or it wasn't possible to, or I tried but couldn't. And all of those things mean the same as failure to. So understanding rephrasing is also a very important skill, but that means you've got to have a really good vocabulary. Okay? So let's move on to part B. Now in part B, as we said, it's slightly different. You've got these 6 questions, and you will hear the narrator read out this part, and then you have about maybe about 12, 15 seconds to actually read the question. And that is 12, 15 seconds to read each, not to read all 6, to read each. So they'll read out this and they'll say, now read the question, and then you've got 15 seconds. So again, you see, you need to be able to read and absorb quite quickly what's going on. Okay, so essential skills you need are reading comprehension. What are the question and each option really talking about? And this is important. Why? Because of what I like to call misdirect. OET knows that some of you are going to be very familiar with the situation. And they know that some of you might try to guess. They're trying to focus not on your ability to guess or your knowledge of this specific situation, but your knowledge of language. And to do that, sometimes the language is so that there's a slight misdirect. So there'll be a word in the question that may be similar to a word in the audio. And because maybe you're not so confident in your language, you go, oh, I heard direct in the audio and direction is on the page, so this must be the answer. No, 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 no. What you have to do is read the whole thing and ask yourself, what are they really talking about? They're not talking about a word, they're talking about a context. Okay, again, timely, read speed, and I say timely here, not fast, simply because here you really do need attention to the details. Okay, and again, understand restating and rephrasing, because the information in the options is heavily restated. So you've got to be able to understand, well, this means the same thing as that or similar. The different kinds of function of language is also important to understand. So part B, it looks at things like, do you understand gist? Do you understand inference, which is a kind of conclusion? Do you understand call to action? That is, what is one person asking the other to do? Broader meaning, which is kind of like gist, you can say almost. And also the purpose of the communication. Why are they talking? Is it to inform? Is it to warn? Is it to advise? Is it to suggest? What? And again, therefore, because of all of this, you need a wide vocabulary, because the same thing can be said in different ways. But another little skill you need to have is the ability to change focus quickly. Because unlike part A, where you've got 5 minutes to get comfortable in a setting, here you're going boom, boom, one topic, next topic, one scenario, next scenario, next scenario, and they're all different. So your mind has got to be able to shift gears very, very quickly. And that comes, of course, with practice, practice, practice. Okay, and of course, being comfortable with the language. So let's look at part C. Now in part C, as we said, you've got these 2 longer audios. It's a healthcare professional who is either doing an interview or giving a lecture. And because these are longer audios, one of the skills you really need is to be able to focus for longer periods of time without your mind wandering and getting distracted. And it may sound like a silly thing, but so many of my students always go, oh, you know, I get distracted in my mind. You need to be able to focus and stay focused, stay in the moment. All right. And that comes, of course, with practice. Because for most of you, this is your second language. So your mind might, you know, want to lapse into Urdu or Greek or Turkish or whatever. No, you've got to stay in English and stay focused on what is being said. Again, similarly, you've got to be able to understand gist, broader meaning, inference, attitude, and opinion as well, because the speaker is going to have an opinion that they give, but in an indirect way usually, and the purpose of them saying some things. So they may bring up a topic, and the question is not about the topic itself, but why are they talking about this topic? Restating and rephrasing once again. And again, that means you need to have a wide vocabulary because same thing, different ways. Okay. So one tip I will give here that I actually, in retrospect, should have put on the end screen, but I'll mention it here. You might be asking, how do I know how to develop these skills? Well, a good way to do it, especially if you are working with a tutor, either in a classroom or privately, is to work with your tutor and say to them, look, or your teacher and say to them, look, I'm having problems with gist questions. Can you get together a series of gist questions? And in this session, we focus on that. Or I'm having problems with attitude and opinion. Can we focus on that? And spend a little time focusing on each type of questions. OET materials are set up in such a way that they can do this. And your tutor, if you're working especially with a premium preparation provider, they are able to, they know what kind of question is what, and they can put together a lesson plan for you. And by focusing on each type, you get more comfortable in each type so that when you come now and you're going from one kind of question to another and then back to inference and to purpose and so on, you're comfortable because you've been through it before. Okay. So those are the skills that you have to develop. So let's look at how you can develop overall these skills. First in building general listening skills and then in specific listening skills. Now, the ability to pick up exact words. The biggest problem in my experience that people have with this, well, the biggest problems, one is listening to different accents. Now, in practice, I know you want to score well in class with your tutor or in homework. So you might think, oh, I like to listen to this accent because I can understand it more clearly. And I will say to you, no, quite the opposite. Go for the accents in your practice and in your study that you have difficulty with. Because you don't know what's coming up in your exam. And in your exam, you may have an accent that you are not really familiar with. So you want to go in there having listened to English and Scottish and Irish and Australian and American and Indian and on and on and on, so that when you hear them, it's not a problem, okay? So there are lots of online resources. For example, Pro Medical English, we have a library that we check regularly and we update it and we use it in our online courses as well as in classroom with our students so that they have a range of accents to listen to. And we use both health topics and non-health topics because it's nice to to get them comfortable with, well, almost anything that they hear. Building endurance, and from this I mean listening endurance. Again, when you first start listening to English, especially if you are not regularly in an English-speaking environment, and your encounter with English is only in your OET practice. When you first start, you might find, oh, more than 5 minutes and I get a headache. But like everything, think of your brain like a muscle, any other muscle. The more you train it, the higher your endurance builds. So what you can do is start by listening to 5 minutes. If that's too much, start with 3. But what you want to do is every few days, add on a minute, add on a couple minutes, add on 5 minutes. So try to shoot for 40, maybe even an hour of straight listening. An hour might be a little bit much, but still, but an hour of continuous listening, paying attention. And a good way you can do to help yourself figure out if you're paying attention is, as you listen, just write down little notes. If you have a goal, I have to write down like a quick summary of the last 2 minutes. It actually also helps you to focus. Okay? Comfort level. And by comfort level, I just mean getting over that general anxiety of English is about to start playing. No. And you do that by listening daily, even if it's just for a few minutes, and even to non-health topics. And as a matter of fact, if you listen to health and non-health topics, then yeah, you're that much more comfortable. They can bring anything. It doesn't worry you. But then you also want to improve your OET comfort level. And here you want to listen to especially health topics. Why? Because in listening to health topics, you'll be encountering more and more of that very specific health vocabulary that you will encounter in OET, all the subtests: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Okay? So common threads throughout is regular exposure to listening, but regular exposure also to different kinds of accents. Very, very important. Start with short periods often and increase. As I said, try to get yourself up to an hour. Okay? And anything in native English to increase your general comfort level, but also health topics. Okay? And of course, regular practice with OET papers to practice those earliest skills that I mentioned of identifying signpost words, switching quickly from one topic to the other, listening for gist, inference, opinion and attitude, broader meaning, call to action, purpose, and so on. Okay? And on that note, that is the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now at this point. And at this point, the floor is open for you to ask me questions, primarily about the listening, because that's what today's topic is about, but honestly about anything you want to ask to do with OET. So the floor is now open. And again, there's this little delay here that we are working with. And while it catches up, let's see who else we have that joined us and from where. Sri Lanka. Hello, Kumari. Well done. Oops. All of a sudden, it seems to have stopped. Sorry, there we go. Hello, Mohammed. Nice for joining us. Thank you for joining us. No one has any questions about the listening? Or is it that my feed has stuck? Let me just okay. Let me just renew my feed. Okay, good. I've renewed my feed. All right. Okay, well, if not listening, then does anyone have any issues to do, say, with writing? Oops, we've got problems again.
And again, there's this little delay here.
Okay, there we go. Right. Oh, right. Thank you very much, Suping. You see, I do get forgetful to remind me about misspelling in the listening. Right. Now, spelling is relevant, of course, in the listening part A, because you have to write. Right, spelling is important, but OET primarily is testing to see that you are hearing that detailed word. So if, for example, you misspelled immunosuppressants, and I'm going to type in here in the box, and suppressants, let me make sure I spell it correctly, yeah, is correct, but you spell it with, hold on, I'll just type here, but you spell IMUNOSUPPRESANTS, okay, which is wrong spelling. Okay, the examiners know you have heard the word. They know that you have heard the correct word. You spelt it incorrectly. Chances are you will get the mark. Okay, or if you say immunosuppressant instead of immunosuppressants, you'll more than likely get the mark. If, however, you spell, let's take another instance of spelling a word incorrectly, but you actually end up spelling another word that actually is a real English word. So let's say a person has a rash around their waist, W-A-I-S-T. That's a part of the body. And you put a rash around their waist, W-A-S-T-E. Okay, once again, I'm going to write it in the chat. Waist versus waist. Now here, oops, incorrect. Now here it's incorrect. Why? Because you've changed the meaning. Okay, waste, W-A-S-T-E, is garbage, something you throw out, not the body. All right. Another thing is abbreviations. The person in the audio says ultrasound, but you put U/S instead of ultrasound because maybe time was running out. Chances are OET will mark that as correct because it's usually how we abbreviate ultrasound anyway. And in any case, OET gives the examiners often options for answers that they will accept. All right. So that's the answer to misspelling. Of course, you cannot predict every single thing that you're going to misspell. However, so the rule of thumb is write as accurately as you can. And if you genuinely cannot spell the word you hear it, you know what it sounds like, but you can't spell it, or you don't know to spell it, maybe it's a new word, write what you think you hear as close as possible. Who knows? You might be correct, or the examiner may give you the mark anyway, because listening part A is corrected by a real human being. It's not a machine, a real human being. Okay? All right. Let's go back here. Tips for part B and part C. Oh, that's a big question. Actually, let me go back a bit now because people are now the stream has now caught up with me. Can we underline the keywords in the questions? Yes, you can. If you are doing a paper-based test, you should be able to underline. If you were doing on computer, you should also at least be able to highlight certain words to give yourself little flags. Remind yourself, draw your attention to the signposts. Just be careful in your underlining and your scribbling to keep the space for your answer clear so the examiner actually knows what your answer is. Okay. Please, is there a grammar class for beginners? Dale, I'll say Godwin. I don't want to mess up your name, Godwin. We do have online courses and classes for low intermediate to intermediate language speakers that focus on grammar building, vocabulary building, especially in the healthcare setting. And yes, it is specifically moving you towards OET. So there are exercises in the course that are very OET similar, so that by the time you finish the course, you're familiar with the OET skills needed and the layout. Just go to our website, promedicalenglish.com, and look at Medical English. If you click on that tab, you'll see the courses there, and you'll also see access to the tutor classes. How many correct answers needed for 400? Now, that is a tricky question, and here is why. You get, when you write your test, it's a total of 42 for listening, yes. So you have a raw score. That is how many you get right and how many you get wrong. But there is no straight math that says automatically you get 38 out of 42, you automatically get 400. Why? Because the examiners take your paper, your OET paper is corrected by two people who do not know one another. They have no idea about each other. And then those scores are put together and it is put into a computer algorithm. And the computer algorithm is what comes up with your final score, not a human being with a calculator. And I want to make that very, very clear. Okay, so to say how many you need for 400, that is very tricky. But I will tell you this, a safe zone is try, and this is so important, I'm going to type it into the box. Try not to get more than 2 wrong in each section. Okay, and by each section, I mean part A has 2 audios, so try not to get more than 2 wrong in audio 1 and in audio 2. Try not to get more than 2 wrong in part B. Try not to get more than 2 wrong in part C, extract 1, and try not to get more than 2 wrong in part C, extract 2. If that is your goal, then you are on the right track to definitely reaching that 400, okay? But to say, okay, this number is exactly 400 or exactly 410, that's the computer, okay? All righty, hi ma'am, please tips for part B and C. Oh, that's a big question, Shaija. That is a big question. What you can do is afterwards go back and look at the presentation that I did at the beginning. And honestly, tips for part B and C is like this. Question, what is your problem? Is your problem keeping up with the audio? Is your problem understanding what is said? Is your problem connecting what is said with what is on the page because your vocabulary might not be strong? Is your problem spelling? Is your problem actually keeping up with the audio? You don't hear signpost words. You don't understand the layout of the listening part C extract, how it tends to flow. Each of those is a skill that you need to focus on if it is your weakness. And not everyone has the same weakness, I'm sorry. So some people, they understand everything. They don't care about accents, but keeping up with the audio is a problem because they get lost, especially in part C. Okay? And that is a specific skill that you can develop if you understand the layout of the listening part C. So you can work with your tutor, work with your teacher to understand how the listening part C flows. So you can get tips on that. So you can improve your performance that way. Yeah. Part C, how to crack the answer. You make it sound like a code. I could say this: get very, very comfortable with English and just go back to the beginning of this webinar and look at the video. I know everyone wants to know, oh, there's a shortcut. There's a shortcut. No. OET is a lot of different skills that you have got to develop and bring together. There is no one skill or no one answer. So look at each of those skills that I mentioned and spend time developing each of them, focusing on it, practicing on it, and then do your whole paper. OET is very much lots of parts and the sum of lots of those parts together. Okay. In listening, is it acceptable? Answer, write it in singular, not plural. As I said, dang, honestly, if all that's missing is a S, vegetable instead of vegetables, there's a greater than 95% chance that you'll get it right, okay? Because the examiner knows, oh, they heard vegetable. They know how to spell it. This is obviously vegetables. Maybe they were writing fast and forgot the S, okay? I have a problem to listening speedy audios. I cannot catch words. Rizvana, practice. Because yes, you're going to have speakers who speak very, very quickly. You're going to have, well, who speak very quickly. You're going to have speakers who speak more slowly. For example, I tend to speak more slowly, but that's because I'm an English teacher. Yeah. But they're not going to give an audio where the speaker speaks so quickly, you are not reasonably able to understand. So Rizvana, what it sounds like that you need to focus on that skill that I mentioned, listening to different kinds of speakers and different kinds of accents. Although I must say, there are some people who just cannot pick up certain tones. They have kind of a tonal deafness, and for them it is a challenge. If you are one of those rare people, and I've had a couple of students who had that problem, you can usually pick up the pattern. They actually do better in part B and part C, because then it's about understanding a wider tract of text than they do in part A, which is unusual because part A is kind of easier. Because in part A, they're listening for detailed words and sometimes they miss it because they have a tonal deafness for certain, tones. If that is the case, unfortunately, that's not an OET problem. That is a speech, audio pathology problem, and you have to work with a different kind of specialist, not an OET specialist. Okay. Some words I can listen to for opinion and attitude, emo. What I will say is adjectives and adverbs, things like surely, definitely, or phrases without a doubt, okay? It is certainly acceptable if, or it would be certainly acceptable if. Those are the kinds of things that show the attitude of the speaker or in the reading, the writer, okay? And there's a range of, there's no limit. It is doubtful if, undoubtedly. There's a whole bunch of words, things like that, that portray opinion rather than saying, I think, or attitude rather than saying, I think my point of view is, or in my opinion, okay? So words like that. How do I improve your concentration, Kaya? I try to listen and write down the answer at the same time. I don't get all the answers when I only listen. I tend to catch up all words. Do you have any advice for that? Yes, Kaya, practice. How about this? Try, instead of doing it randomly, try being systematic, okay? Try to just listen and see if you can understand, maybe to shorter text, then stop and write down. Then increase the length of the text and write down in the middle as well as at the end, some notes. And then increase, not the text, sorry, increase the audio, increase the length of the audio and the amount you write. This is something that only comes with practice, but if you're systematic, you can actually build up that ability as you go, okay? So you can start first, once again, with listening and then writing, then listen right in the middle as well as at the end, and then extend it, extend it until you can listen and write, listen and write, listen and write, and then stop the audio and summarize at the end as well. Okay, sorry, blister, yes, Angeline, oh, that's such a sweet name. Angeline, that's an example of one that, yeah, the examiner may say, oh, you know, they were writing fast, they forgot the S, no problem. Okay. Where can you get free writing samples for OET? If you go to the OET website, that is occupationalenglishtest.org, and you look for, or quite frankly, just Google free OET sample papers, but to ensure you get the correct quality and standard OET papers, when the list comes up on Google, look at the website that you're going to and go to the official OET.com site. So just Google free OET sample papers in the list, find occupationalenglishtest.org, pick that one, and it'll take you straight to the page. And you will see all the free sample papers there. Okay, all of them. That's where to find the free the writing samples. Oh, and the writing case notes on the occupational englishtest.org site. They also have the sample answers with them. Yeah, so you can download both the case notes and the sample answer. But come on, try and write your own. Try and write your letter first, and then look at the sample papers, while remembering there is no one way to write a really good letter. Okay, the samples are just that. Examples of good practice generally, good language, good vocabulary, good grammar. Okay. Any good tips for listening subtests? Jesh, I just gave a whole bunch, so you can go back and listen to the audio. You have a question about the computer-based exam, Azza. In writing, do I have the writing task on a paper and I write on the computer, or both? If you are doing the computer-based tests, everything is on the computer, but you tend to have a split screen. So on one side, you can see the case notes and then write on the other side as you look at the case notes, right? However, I think in the first 5 minutes, all you see is the case notes. You can't write anything anyhow, because the first 5 minutes is reading the case notes only, okay? Thank you for reminding me. I have a guide that I'm supposed to put up on our website, and I'll try to get it up for the new year for any of you who are doing your test in January. You can pop back to our website to see the guide for computer-based testing. Is capitalization important? Do you mean in writing or in listening? In the listening? No. In writing, capitals are used for different things. Where capitals are very important, if you're writing somebody's name or the name of a disease that's named after someone, like Crohn's disease or Alzheimer's, or basics like the beginning of a sentence, then yes, capital letters are important. At the beginning of a sentence, giving people's names and so on, and so giving people's proper titles like Mr., Mrs., Doctor, months of the year, January, February, March, and things like that. Yes, capitals are important. Standardized international abbreviations, PT, PTT, HB, and so on. Yes, capitals are important. However, if you're talking about, ooh, do I put a capital letter for paracetamol or a common letter, a capital letter for levastatin or a common letter, a good guideline is this. Whatever is written in the case notes, however it's written in the case notes, write it in your letter. So if it's written with capital in the case notes, use capital in the letter. Because sometimes it is hard for people, especially if you come from a very specific region, you don't know if a drug is a generic name or if it is a brand name. Follow the guide in the case notes. Okay. Part A, can I write all answers in capital letters because you have poor handwriting, Veronica? That's a good question. Some people do that. It does make their writing clear. I cannot see, it is not one of the writing criteria. Handwriting is not a writing criterion. It's not. However, of course, if your handwriting is so poor that no one can read it, then yeah, you cannot get marks for what the examiner cannot read. That is true. Honestly, if the only way your handwriting is readable is to write in capital letters, do it. But I have students who say to me, oh, my handwriting is so poor. And actually, it's not as bad as you think, maybe with a little practice. But yes, if it's a short time to your exam and you're really, really worried about it and your handwriting really is bad, it's better to write a letter that the examiners can read. Yes. Okay. I need to start from zero studying for OET tests. I was studying ALS before, ALBA, but I decided to start OET. How can I start with it? Which official materials will I need to buy? ALBA, go to the occupationalenglishtest.org website. Go to the part where you get free sample tests. And the first thing you do is understand the layout of the paper by downloading one of those sample tests. You have not mentioned which profession, but the good thing is the sample papers are laid out by professional. Choose your profession and go in. The listening and reading are done by all professionals, so just grab any listening and any reading. But for writing and speaking, you will see your profession, click your profession, download a sample, and then on the OET website and on OET on Facebook here, as well as on YouTube, you can see examples of good speaking practice. As well, OET has a host of tutorials. Likewise, promedicalenglish.com, you can go to our website. We frequently start students from zero, okay? And you will also, if you go to our website and to our YouTube, you will see a lot of guidelines there as well, okay? On computer-based, could we highlight important notes in the writing section? You should have the ability, the whole point of the computer-based test is you should be able to do the same things on the computer, or most of them, that you can do in writing. So you should be able to underline or highlight on computer-based testing. Again, if your test is in January or afterwards, pop back to our website. I will. Again, I remind myself, get that helpful guide up there for people to see. All right. If a letter is a referral to a nurse for wound dressing, should I write the address? Oops, it's moving quickly. Should I write the address of the patient and where? And what about medical and social history? Is it relevant? I'm sorry, I can't read your name because it's in Arabic and I don't read Arabic. However, if you're writing a letter to a nurse for wound dressing, should I write the address of the patient? You don't need to. OET doesn't ask for you to write the address of the patient. They ask, of course, in your formatting to write at the top needs to be, one side or the other, needs to be the person you're writing to, nurse, whoever, nurse X, and their location. So wound care clinic, main hospital, city center, Timbuktu, whatever. Yeah. Now, if it is that the nurse has to go to the patient's home, that's different. I must admit, I have not seen a letter like that. Maybe you can write, please see attached the patient's address or something for your home visits. Okay, but putting that information in the body of the letter, the details of the patient's address, that is usually not asked for. That is not asked for. Okay. Oh, Alba's a nurse. Okay, Alba. Okay. Where can we check more sample of writing letters? Josh, yeah, once again, on the occupational English test.org site, the free sample tests. On our site, as long as you're doing writing corrections with us, we always give every single case note has a sample letter that we share. Okay. After the sign-off example, sincerely yours, is this a space between the sign-off and the registered nurse? So you mean like kind regards, sincerely, space? You don't need it. You don't need it. If you put it, if you leave it out, in this case, it won't make a big deal. But in the body of your letter, please, between paragraphs, a space. At the top, the address of the person, space. Date, space, or vice versa. Dear so-and-so, space. Ray, space. Paragraphs. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to answer 2 more questions and then sign off because we started late and that would have been the 1 hour. So I went to the exam and I made a mistake. I put has instead of have. Would that be considered to cut my marks? Here is how OET considers grammar. They do not sit down with a pen and correct and take off 1 mark for every grammar error. If you make a small grammar error in an otherwise well-written letter, they're not going to dwell on it. They're not. However, if you're making repeated errors of grammar in practically every sentence, every other sentence in every paragraph, then they're going to pay attention, and yes, then you're going to lose marks. Why? Because your grammar is now distracting from what you have to say. And the examiner should never be distracted from what you're trying to say. Okay? And honestly, if that's the only mistake, the examiner might be reading so fast, they don't even notice it. Okay? All right. I'm a nurse, Anithakaj. I am a nurse, letter writing with the date, hold on, letter writing initially on top about the date, either admission or discharge date. A good guideline for dating your letter. Date your letter the last date you saw the patient, which is usually that last date before they give the discharge plan and management. That's a good guideline. If you date your letter according to the last date you saw the patient, you're bang on. But if on the top of the letter at the corner you want to write the date of your exam, you can do that. But in the letter itself. Okay. All right. All right. So on that note, I'm going to sign off. Are there any? Okay, one last one. Bang. Is there any changes in the score if you do remarking and listening? That's a tough one because it honestly depends on what happened in listening part A, what you did in listening part A. In listening part B and C, it's pretty straightforward. Your answer is either right or wrong because it's multiple choice. There's no kind of gray area. So the area for error is in the listening part A with your writing. Is your spelling wrong? Are you putting different words than you should? Whatever. If you're borderline and that, say you're 340 and all of your other subtests are fine, you may want to ask, but listening, because it's one right answer, your answer is either right or wrong. It's not like the writing or the speaking. Okay. All right. So on that note, I am going to sign off now. I will, however, come back as usual, either at the end of the day or in the next couple of days and answer any questions that come in after this. So if you do have questions, still put them in. And there's a chance that I'll pop back in and answer them, okay? So on that note, I'm going to say bye for now. I hope you guys learned something, and I'm not going to see you again before the holiday season. So a happy holiday season to everyone. Please stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy your time with your family, your friends, and for those of you who can get a good rest and greet 2022 well in body and well in spirit. Okay? Bye for now. Bye-bye.